coaches across the country used the Coachpad this past season to be more efficient with their scout card prep on the weekends as well as when out on the practice field working with their scout teams. Whether you're a coach using a computer program to create cards or drawing them by hand, the Coachpad is for you. Never printing paper or stuffing a binder, clearly seeing scout cards outdoors in the bright sun, and using the coach pad on game days, syncing diagrams from the press box to the sideline were some of the features coaches enjoyed this season. This offseason, get your coach pad at thecoachpad.com to get your program ready for next season. Thecoachpad.com. Welcome back to another episode of the Gap Down Backer podcast. Today we have the head coach of Windham High School in New Hampshire, Jack Byrne. Coach, how you doing?
Hey, what's going on, buddy?
How was your holiday season? Everything go well?
Yeah, it went great. Just wrapped it up, and yeah, now we get some kids sleeping a little bit later this morning, so this is good. I can slide down here and do this, and they're all up late playing with their toys and sleeping a little bit later, so it's pretty good.
Good. Now, we'll kind of get into kind of some of the option stuff today as we go, but how do you end up as the head football coach at Windham?
Yeah, kind of a cool roundabout, story for me. I grew up in Massachusetts, outside of Boston, Tewksbury, Mass. Played there, and then I played at Tufts University, pretty high academic school outside of Boston. Had some great coaches there, and but between my high school coaches and college coaches, I knew I wanted to coach, so jumped right into it back in my hometown right after graduating college, and then moved out to Colorado for a couple years in my 20s. Did my crazy 20s out in Breckenridge, Colorado. Coached at Summit High School, which was awesome. Just being basically right on top of a ski mountain, and then being able to coach football and wrestling and stuff there was great. Saw the writing on the wall as far as like having to finish my degrees and get a teaching job and all that stuff. So I ended up seeing that this new school was being built, which it doesn't happen in New England. Like as far as a new school being built in Colorado, it happens all the time with the sprawl of that state. So I look back, and the town my cousin had moved to, Windham, New Hampshire, was building their own high school, and my ears perked up, and I started looking at it, and ended up flying home and did an interview and got the job as a defensive coordinator. And then I had to wait another year for the teaching job, but it was worth it. It was like one of those good grinding years where you really pay your dues, and before you get your dream job. So yeah, that was back in 2009, and been there ever since. I took over as the head coach in 2019. We had our former head coach went down and took an AD job in Massachusetts, and yeah, I ended up taking the head job, and I would have worked for that guy forever. I would have been a D coordinator for my whole career, especially at that time my kids were so little. Whatever I could have done to keep my job simple, I would have done. But the job opened up, and I really felt that I wanted to do it. I didn't really want to step away, so yeah, took the head job and been rolling ever since. So it's been a long road. I guess we're going on 15 years in Windham now.
Okay. Now, we'll kind of get into it. Some reason I've had a lot of option guys on lately. As people will kind of see, as much as I try to break them up at this point with some other people in between. But kind of why the shotgun option?
Yeah, for sure. For us, it's cool. I think we have we have a situation that I'm sure there's a lot of schools around the country that have this situation, but we're we're a much smaller school in a large division. So even though it's a small state, New Hampshire has some pretty big schools in our Division I. So our biggest division. So we had some success at lower divisions, and now they restructured the numbers and put us up in the higher division. So we're hanging with about just over 1,000 kids, but we play against one school that has 3,500 kids, and then we play another school that has 1,800 kids and 2,000 and 1,500. So the odds just aren't always in our favor. We have excellent athletes. We have very healthy, happy kids. They work their butts off, and good supportive families, but the numbers just aren't, enrollment wise, don't give us the right odds, I guess. So we needed a chance to be either, to be better when we have the talent, but to be different when we don't, so that hopefully we can, we can be successful through the long haul, I guess.
Okay. Now, I mean, kind of for people who don't know, I mean, obviously that's kind of derived from the Tony DeMeo system. I mean, really, I'd say there's two shotgun option systems of prevalence. There's a Tony DeMeo system, which he took from a flex bone and he built into a shotgun option.
Mhm.
And God, I mean, I have copies of his VHSs / DVDs, and those are the early 2000s. And then there's the kind of newer Coastal Carolina stuff.
Mhm.
I mean, kind of what does your base run game look like out of the shotgun option? What do you guys kind of live and die in? What are your 5 or 6 runs you kind of breathe?
Yeah, for sure. So we are really mainly Tony DeMeo with a couple of our own ideas that we switch. But most of my ideas I run through Tony anyway. I'm always checking in with him. He's unbelievable. He talk about like a guy that answers the phone. Like anytime I've ever called him, he answers the phone. Like it's just like we called him at halftime one time. Just to just ask a couple questions. So we mainly go through his stuff, and then we have dipped into a little bit of like Ferris State and Coastal Carolina and that kind of stuff. But his the way he explains things is so solid. So we're gonna really hang our hat on triple. We teach everything from quarterbacks to offensive coordinators to reminding myself, like, if it takes you more than 5 seconds to think about what play to call, you call triple, and that's it. Like it's over. Like just call it, because you've run it 1,000 times. The kids can make you right. You're okay. To play off of that, we'll go with an outside veer. We just call it down. So we'll be able to read the number 2, the outside backer, and we added in a lot of speed this year, a lot of speed option, and the way Tony does it, which I really like it, is we do a lot of speed option with a kind of a flash fake to the tailback or fullback, whatever you want to call them. We'll do, if we need to get out of the option game for a little bit, we run a lot of jet, and a lot of dive, just a lot of zone dive that, if we had actually put zone dive in, 2 years ago, we would have had a really good shot to pull a big upset off. But, it just takes so long to install triple that, and really get it good, that, it's a big investment to start adding more to it. So, that's really where we'll hang in the run game. We'll do some double options outside. We'll run like a stud option where we'll read the number 2 and all that stuff. So, yeah, but I mean, I wish I had more to tell you, but it's really formationing people as much as we can and figuring out where can we run triple, and if we can't run triple anywhere, there's probably something there, and if I don't see it, then I'm not being a very good coach that day. So.
Okay. I mean, let's start with, because we're going to talk about two more particularly. Like, I mean, you mentioned the speed option a little bit there and how you run it. Like, I think most option teams either run speed or load. I would say most of the time, even if it's not your like bread and butter, it'll be in there. Like, I've watched a lot of flex bone and split back veer teams lately, and some will run them a lot more heavily than others. I've also discovered the flex bone coaches who don't like letting their kids read anything will just run rocket instead. But that's a
Yep.
whole other conversation. But like, I mean, kind of where do you start with speed option, and kind of where does that fall in like your install process, and kind of like, I mean, how do you block? I know, because there's 18 billion different ways I've learned to block speed option. Some people zone 2, zone away,
Mm-hmm.
block in man, block not block in man. Like, so where's your kind of whole process with speed option?
Yeah. Well, I mean, every year it's definitely been earlier in the install. Especially this year, we had some real solid slot backs with some pretty good speed, especially for New England. I mean, there's fast kids everywhere, but we had some pretty fast kids, and so we wanted to make sure we had some options there. So pretty early in the install game, I'd say we almost always we'll install triple first, and then we'll get a play action and a quick game off of it, because our thought process is, if we had a game tomorrow, what needs to be in. Like, I'm always having guys trim it down and saying, hey, Don't overthink it. Don't do too much. What if we had to play tomorrow? What do we need in? Well, we need triple in. We need to be able to play action off it, and we need a quick game pass. And then we'll kind of decide where we want to go next. And usually we'll put our outside veer in second, just because it's similar. I mean, it's just moving the attack point out a little bit, reading a little bit different. So I'd say speed's probably our third option that we put in, but we ended up running it a lot this year. It was really big. So as far as how we block it, I mean, so again, I keep, it's just in my own brain. I always go back to triple. When we block triple, we just say gap away double. That's for everybody. Gap away double, avoid the number one. And for us, number one is first man outside of three technique. I know some people say handoff key, some people say pitch key and all that stuff. We started teaching our kids, you got to identify where 1, 2, and 3 are. And so on triple, that's our one play that's really, gap away with a double if you can, on the way there. And then for speed, we made that a gap 2. And all we say is we say gap 2, avoid 1. Gap 2, avoid 1. So, for our tackle, we, in our last 4 games, when we really started going full gap 2 on it, we started having our tackle, really arc around the number 1, no matter what. Like, try to get outside of 1, because we wanted to get the tackle up to the safety if we could, because that's the guy that kept, flying down, and we had to make him miss. So if we can get the tackle, up to the safety, or if we can exchange the tackle and the slot's job, that's huge for us. So it's gap 2 for the O-line, avoid number 1. The front side slot's going to block the number 2, which would be the pitch key on triple. And then we can exchange that any way we want, but that's the starting point. You know what I mean? If we want to go with the receiver, we'll tell the receiver just to stock block early. Like for the young kids, freshmen and JV guys, it's like, just block the guy in front of you. Keep it simple. But then they start knowing the rules, so they can break them a little. And then we start doing some exchanges, and having that receiver go to the safety, and then we can arc to the corner and arc to the outside backer. So for us, it's really everything's gap 2. And then in the backfield, like I was saying, when we run a speed to our backside slot and he's in a pitch, we actually flash fake to the fullback. So, or we call it a tailback, because we have different types of guys there. But we flash that, and we've continued to play around with, do we want him to fake, or do we want him to, basically wrap for the inside backer? So we've done 2 different things with that. I'm always a fan of faking. Tony DeMeo and I kind of disagree on some things, and I usually end up giving in to him, but he really loves just wrapping and getting guys more to the block. Whereas I kind of know what the average high school kid in our area is going to think, and I think we can get a lot of inside backers really stuck in the mud if we're really selling those fakes and committing to those. So yeah, so we'll fake away with him. Sometimes we'll have the tailback put his foot in the ground and really arc and try to hook the inside backer. And and then we pitch off the 1. And we always tell our quarterback, if there's no one to pitch off, just keep running. If that number 1 is seeing it as a reach block and he's just hooked up, don't pitch off a guy that isn't threatening you. So let's take it downfield a little bit further. So hopefully that explains it pretty good.
No, it does. And because speed option's always an interesting play. Like from a cost standpoint, is would you define it as one of your lower or higher cost, because you've already got triple in, so a lot of the pitch stuff you've already worked, a lot of the blocking you said you've already worked. So would you say by the time you get it in, would you say it's probably one of your lesser cost plays because of just all the pre-work that's been done?
Sure. Yeah, almost all our plays after triple become low cost, because we only have 2 real blocking schemes when you really look at it. There's little wrinkles to it, but we either have, I've labeled it as like we're a full slide team or a half slide team, and I know that's always in pass cover in pass protection, but we just tell guys, hey, on triple we're all going away. On most of our other runs we're going all 2, with a few little exceptions, like avoid number 1 and that kind of stuff. So it's really not a huge investment. And especially when you get those slot backs that see us, give and give and give and give, and when they know it's you know, it's going to be pretty much an automatic pitch. I mean, they're pretty invested. They're going to learn that pretty quick and get that stuff down. And they're willing to really block for each other and work real hard to make sure that we can get to that pitch phase. So yeah, once that stuff's in, once the kids understand how to label, you know, the number one handoff key, the number two pitch key, the number three, the slot's going to block on triple, then everything else kind of just falls into place after that. I mean, it still takes some time, but yeah, not a huge investment once we get rolling.
Okay. Now let's talk about outside veer a little bit, because I mean, when you think shotgun offenses, you're not necessarily going to think true outside veer, outside veer. I mean, what would you say the biggest differences between under center outside veer and shotgun outside veer are?
Yeah, I've tried to make it as little as possible because it was such a big pain to us. I mean, we have a team, Winnicott High School, who's right on the seacoast, and they run split veer, and man, outside veer for them just hit so well. It hit so hard and fast, and it was so dangerous in the red zone. And so, you know, even though we're in gun, you know, we try to make that as close to it as we can. So, you know, our quarterback, we actually kind of stumbled on it by mistake. We had a quarterback injury a couple years ago, and we had to put like an emergency senior receiver in at quarterback. And you know, he just started running right at the read key, you know, which was now the outside backer, you know. So the way he sprinted downhill, almost like it was like a QB power type thing. You know, he really sprinted at the tackle. And because he was so fast and we could, you know, maybe change how deep he was, you know, he got to the tackle pretty similar to how an under center outside veer would hit. So now that, you know, that's kind of our cue. We just tell him race to the tackle. You know, we catch that ball, we want to push and get downhill, you know, on an angle to that tackle and really race, you know. So the quarterback's running to the inside foot, the tailback's running to the outside foot, the ball's going right to the middle. And we want to go right behind the tackle so that number two needs to really make a choice. So I would say it's not that different. Maybe that's just me thinking I'm coaching really well, but I try to make it as similar as I can. I say, you know, as fast as a kid who's under center does it, I want you guys to go get downhill, really make that outside backer who's supposed to be a force player, figure out what he's going to do.
Okay. Now, I mean, what's continuing with the outside veer? Like, what does a practice progression look like in teaching it, like from an O line and a backfield standpoint? Obviously, receivers outside are stop blocking, or you're adding them on motion. You can do a variety of things with the exterior skill guys, but the nitty gritty inside, I mean, where do you start? What is kind of your practice progression look like? Because as you kind of have said, veer can be a very expensive play. Depending on what you're doing, how you teach it, and how much of your offense it is. So kind of what does that part look like?
Yeah. So that's kind of evolved through the years too. I mean, when we first started, outside veer was still gap away. You know, we said, hey, treat it just like this, but then we go down on the one. And we've changed it. I mean, I guess the progression for four of the linemen, I mean, really from the front side guard all the way to the backside tackle, I mean, we're all gap two now. So those guys are all gap two. So that's, you know, the same combo principles or whatever you want to say, double, you know, gap, double, you know, type stuff. So that progression is going to be the same. The main part that we have to work all the time is what we call 2 for 2. So we want to block the number one, so the original handoff key, and we want to block the first backer inside of number two. So, and you guys, most of your guys that you're talking to use those, the numbering system. Okay, so
yeah, I think as I've done I mean, again, I've talked to mostly under center guys, but a lot of what I've either read or I talked to, it's a very big numbering system. There's a couple that it's more true, like almost wing T-ish rules, but I think most still keep some sort of numbering system to figure out who they're optioning and what they're optioning. Yes.
Yeah. So I mean, just in case, I mean, I'm sure some guys are listening with a different languages that they use, but we always start with number one. Number one is the first guy outside of a 3 technique. And then we just say, hey, how do I find number 2? And we tell the kids all the time. I mean, this is every day. How do I find number 2? And we do it like a sprinkler. We tell them we go outside to on top. So, all right, where's number 1? Look outside of them, and then move your hand like a sprinkler until you get on top of them. The first guy you see, that's number 2. So it's always outside to on top in that order. And then the way you find 3 is the same thing. You don't count the corner. If the receiver in the corner, we tell them they're in their own room. Don't count the guys in the other room. But yeah, so that's where we're using that terminology. So yeah, so the number 2, we still call him the number 2, but on outside veer, that number 2 becomes the handoff key. And so what we have to do now is we have to really move the line in the area where we're normally reading. Now that number 1, the original handoff key, we have to get movement on him. So, our rule really for them, and this gets worked so much, is, we have to double number 1 until we replace his feet. If we don't replace number 1's feet, just keep doubling him. If the linebacker gets over the top, then we'll deal with it. But we were dealing with a long time of, all right, in this situation, the tackle's going to go inside and get the backer. But in this situation, they're going to, the slot's going to get them. And, we called it 2 for 2. So, it's, our tackle and our slot needed to get the number 1 and the first backer inside 2. And now, we've really just changed it because we had too many guys that were going, 75%. They were playing unsure. They weren't sure what to do. And now it's, until we move the line of scrimmage with number 1, we don't even think about the backer. But hopefully, as we get a real good double with our slots really slamming inside like a tight end would, we can get to that backer a little bit more, and that really puts some pressure on that number 2 overhang outside backer guy. So that's the main progression as far as the blocking and what we work on. I mean, when we come together in indie or group, I mean, it's so huge for the guys that play tackle and the guys that play slot to continue to take the right steps. Can you move number 1? Can you move that, talented D end and get him off his spot before we go to the backer? So.
Okay. Now, I mean, one of my last questions for you is, like I've talked, I think Kenny Simpson has made it more aware, the pods portion, but like I talked to Flexbone and Splitback, and I mean, a lot of coaches use pods, works in small groups to focus on certain areas. How much do you guys use pods in your practice, or is it a lot more indie and team? Like, how do you approach practicing the various things you do?
Yeah, I mean, it always takes a lot of convincing. Like, the assistant coaches always have to really convince me to get guys specialized. Like, for me, I'm always looking for, listen, I need the 5 best linemen and I need the 6th best lineman to know all 5 positions. That's why we've really simplified our blocking. Same thing with skill guys. If I need a guy who, if you can only play end or you can only play left slot, like that's not good enough for what we have. We need our best 11 guys on the field. So we are definitely more classic indie group. And we start practice with team on air. We'll go up and down the field a couple of times and just hit our whole offense, just so we know we hit everything at least once. We keep explaining things, and who knows if that's the right way to do it. But I've just seen, I've seen practices kind of wasted, whether it's my own practices or I've heard it from other coaches where, you send people off to, 50 yards away and where they're working on this, they're working on this. You come together and it's just not gelling. And it's just like, well, what did we do with the last 20 minutes? What are we talking about? So, for me, I would almost always prefer, I always want the O-line to have some indie, but when in doubt, I like all the backs and receivers to be together and running stuff on air and working almost like a 7-on-7, but with run plays too. So I like more group than indie. But true pods, like saying, hey, we're going to take just the tackles and the slots. We're going to go do this. And, I'm not sure every coach has that specialty. We don't have a huge staff, and we're also, we put a big priority on our freshman and JV program to develop those kids. So I don't always have a huge varsity staff to pull specific kids aside, if that makes sense.
Okay.
Oh,
Okay, and then my last question for you, outside of Tony DeMeo, like what resources do you pull for your gun option stuff? Because obviously, I mean, the coastal stuff came out a couple years ago. Tony's got a wide vast, and I know he's really picked it up again um, over the past like 2 years on updating his stuff and putting out newer stuff,
Mhm.
talking a lot more. But outside of like the Tony DeMeo resource, where do you kind of pull, whether it be video, books, other coaches? Where do you kind of pull from for that?
yeah. So our big one is Option Central. That's a lot of Tony's stuff is on there, but then you get some Ferris State on there too. OptionCentral.net has been awesome for us. And then at the college level, dude, that they go under the radar a little bit, but Davidson, definitely worth taking a look at. Davidson, they run gun option and they do it slightly different than us with little different attack points, and they're a very high academic school, so I think they're able to recruit some of those real smart, tough linemen. So their O line is always really good, so they can really pound it against their opponents. So they've been huge for us. As far as like simplifying things and how they run. I mean, the way they run dive, inside veer and outside veer is almost the same. Like they have it's amazing to have here a high academic school and how simple they keep it. So yeah, anybody looking at this stuff, definitely look at Davidson. They're incredible. And then I mean, I always want to see what regular flexbone teams are doing. I mean, the Flexbone 101 guy on YouTube. I mean, just to have someone who has edited it down to just the offensive plays and really see that progression of what they do and how often they're calling the same plays, and how that repetition really all of a sudden it leads to 38 points or 45 points or whatever. So we're always looking at any sort of option, whether it's under center or pistol or gun or whatever.
Okay. Well, coaches, his Twitter will be in the bio. You can give him a follow. You got any questions on the gun option stuff? Coach, give you more details, kind of just little snapshots of speed, option, and outside veer. And then like, share, subscribe, all that lovely jazz. And check out our sponsor, Coachpad. I'm trying to think if I'm missing anything, probably, but oh well. And that's our episode of the Gap Down Backer podcast.